Hey, good morning, Trondheim friends. This is Pastor Sue, and I'm here with this week's edition of Patio Ponderings. Today, my patio is the front step of the historic Trondheim Church, just down the road from our current Trondheim Church, where we worship together. And it just seems so fitting to come down here to be right by the road that connects both churches together, because we've spent a bit of time over the last few weeks in our faith community talking about road trips. And this past Sunday, we heard about the road trip by a couple of disciples that took place on the day that Jesus was raised from the dead, on Easter Sunday. And so these two friends were traveling on the road to Emmaus when a stranger, or at least someone they thought was a stranger, joined them in the walk. But it turned out to be Jesus. They didn't recognize him at first. So as I was going through the week and thinking about this text, I also had the fortunate experience of hearing more in detail about how the Trondheim faith community traveled down the road from the historic church and made their home in our current space. And we reflected on a couple of things in that telling of the story. I got a real sense from the storyteller that they could see where Jesus had been present with them in that trip, but maybe didn't recognize Jesus until later. And we also wondered about what would have happened had this faith community not taken the trip down the road from the historic church to the new church. We wondered if the same people would be in the faith community. We even wondered if the faith community would still exist. You know, there's no way to answer that question. But it is interesting to ponder that. But I found this all really encouraging, because what we're talking so much about now going into this next ministry year is moving forward as a church, especially in light of all that has happened over the past few years with the pandemic and also the changing role of the church in our culture and our society. And I find the confluence of these stories, the bringing together of the story of Trondheim's history with the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus, to be so encouraging. Like in both stories, there were certainly bumps and challenges that were experienced in making that trip down the road. And yet, as a church, we live into the cliche that the destination is not the point, that it is all about the journey. And so we can ponder too then, what happens if we don't make the journey? What happens if we decide to stay still and not move forward as a church? We can never really know the answer to that question either. But there's a couple things we can say for certain, is that as one of my seminary professors talked about often, is that God has a preferred and promised future for us as a church. And if we don't make our road forward, we might not realize that. It might not be doom and gloom. It might not be the end of us as a faith community. But we will not realize God's preferred and promised future for us. And the other thing that we know for certain is that no matter how bumpy the road is, no matter where the road takes us, and it could take us in some ways we can't even imagine right now, that Jesus is always with us on the road, whether we recognize it or not. So lots to ponder in thinking about how we move into our future as a church, and not just us as a local faith community, but as a church broadly. So I would, as always, would love to hear your thoughts on this, and wish you all a wonderful day, and we'll see you on Sunday. Bye.